So this video, is this something that's going to be played in church, or is this like...
No, this is just for the youth during holidays. So
it's like a social media thing.
Chuck up on social media.
Yeah.
And probably YouTube or whatever. And it might be 2 videos, it might be one whole long one.
Yeah, okay.
Depends how much.
So do you actually talk as well?
So I'll just ask you questions so that you know what you're doing. So I know what
Yeah.
you're doing. But
So that I'm actually sort of talking. Yeah, good. Otherwise it would be kind of
Otherwise it's super
like,
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too.
So when I asked you here today to talk about your teen years, what was your first reaction?
Yeah, my first reaction would be, you know, I don't like public speaking or anything like that, but yeah, I'm happy to help out the youth group, and I've been part of the youth and led the worship team and all that for a good few years, so I've got something to share and experience, like a bit of experience to share, so I was happy to come talk about that.
It feels like I'm, I guess, sharing about something that really isn't that long ago.
Stoked that someone is interested, that I got asked. My second thought was, gee, I must be old. But yeah, it's kind of cool to think that you can pass on lessons that you've learnt so that hopefully others might learn from it and not have to go through the same heartaches that I did.
Okay, first reaction, I thought, good, what a good idea. Very cool. And yeah, that was a long time ago.
This is hard because I think there are many lessons that I've learnt from my youth. I'm still in my youth, I feel like, in part.
There'll be something, hang on, I'm just...
So many, but probably, I think, to be grateful for the way I was brought up. My father was a minister, so we were very heavily church. The minister of this church, many other churches as well, but just being brought up in a strong Christian household, so if there was a service on, we were at every service. There were no weekends off, there was no weekend sport, there was no weekend activities. I think I've been playing in church, like piano and stuff like that, since I was 16. It was the first time I started, and in the beginning I don't think I would have maybe had 2 or 3 Sundays off a year. So it was just like service, but also being brought up in that made a huge impact on my faith and foundation and what I knew to be true, and just knew it as truth, and didn't have any real, I still had teenage issues, but I didn't have any real problems, and so that probably growing up in that Christian home was an absolute blessing when I look around and see what other people went through and had to deal with it. I didn't have any of that. I had a solid family, got exposed to so many miraculous things, saw miraculous things, so I knew God was true.
So the biggest lesson I learnt from my teen years would just be to stick with, you know, youth group, stick with the church crowd, because it can either go 2 ways. You can either have your friends in the church, or you can have your friends that are at school that are not necessarily doing the church things and worldly things. So you've got 2 quite distinct paths you can follow there. So I deliberately chose to stick with the people in church and the friends there, and you know, I'm glad I made that decision, because you know, you end up in church and serving and, you know, loving God instead of going down the other path. It doesn't mean you can't hang out with those people, because you need to share your faith with those people, but at the same time there's a line in there of which journey to follow. So
Find your identity in Christ, because the world will try and tell you who you should be, and we're our own worst enemies as well, and never feel good enough, never feel like we fit in. But if you get into God and find your identity in Christ, then He tells you that we're worthy. He tells you that we're loved, that it's not what we do, but how we do it that matters. So yeah, just stay in a close relationship with God.
I think one lesson would be is that, like, listening to your parents actually matters. That is one lesson that I learnt. Yeah, so when you're young, obviously it's very easy to dismiss what your parents might have to say, I think. But what they do say, like, matters. And they probably do actually kind of know what they're talking about, even though we might not think that they do all the time. I think something else that I've realised is like important, that when I was in my youth, I thought that like being busy or doing something all the time was like important to me, and I'd like to have, I guess, a full schedule going on, because I love to, you know, be out and about doing stuff, doing sport, being involved in different things. I love to do that, and all of that is great, but something that I've really been learning and incorporating into my life is how important it is to be. That like our worth doesn't come from things that we might do, but yeah, just being in God's presence, being with God, like that trumps any kind of doing. Like being is the most important thing.
Relationships. Firstly, relationship with God. Secondly, relationships with everyone around you. And I've found that if I haven't been putting in the effort with my relationship with God, then all my friendships and other relationships really battle. And so, yeah, that verse in the Bible where it says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you," really holds true. Like, seek God first, and then, everything else, I know it sounds cliche, but it falls into place.
What I would consider important through my 27 years I've been alive is to be, be positive with everything that comes your way, really. Like, if something happens, or if you hear rumours about yourself, or just take it as water on a duck's back. Like, I've never really taken offence to things that you might hear going around or anything like that, because those people can talk about things like that, but that's ultimately up to them. You know, you're responsible yourself for your self-care, and if you spend your time worrying about other things like that, it's not going to do you any good. So, yeah.
If life has taught you one thing through all the highs and lows, what would it be?
That, and I've been quoting this a little bit lately, that it rains on the just and the unjust. So when I was younger, I think because I had been brought up in that Christian home, and like, I didn't get sick, there was no illness in our family, nobody had died, things were good, and I sort of had that false expectation, I think, that nothing bad could or would happen in life, and that, things would just be, if I was faithful, God was just always going to be, life would always be good, and that was the way it was meant to be. And that's not saying that it won't be, but I soon, as I got older, and it wasn't in my teen years because I didn't have issues or so much struggles so much then, but it was older in my 20s and 30s. So like, I'd always been very capable. I can achieve things, I can do things, manage in my job, in everything I've always done. Like, I've just been an organised person, capable of doing a lot, running a lot, and managing. But then I think I had Jamie, so I was 27, and all of a sudden I came down with PND, postnatal depression, severely postnatal depression, and it went undiagnosed for 12 months, and I was still leading the worship team, leading every week, running off, doing rehearsals, running off, breastfeeding a baby, coming back, leading worship, and then absolutely struggling to the point where I'd wake up in the mornings and just be like, oh no, I'm still alive, why couldn't I have died? And that was constantly, like every day. And my only release during all of that 12-month period was probably when I was at church, on the platform, leading worship. That was my one time where I felt actually normal. sort of thing. And yeah, just went undetected. No one picked up because I was just an absolute, I'd been so capable. I can cover, I can do anything. But even through all of that, God was still faithful. So I guess I learned that it rains on the just and the unjust, and things will come along, but that doesn't mean that God has forgotten me or he's not faithful anymore. And even like then with our farm, like being married to Ronnie and a farmer, that was different because I'd never, you know, I'm not a country kid. I was born in Melbourne, lived in Queensland, came to Horsham. And, but just then dealing with droughts and money issues and worries and like huge debts and how do we balance this and how do we make this work, and never had to deal with that because I'd come from a really great job, well paid, I'd got advancements, promotions and all of that, and all of a sudden having children, and then everything actually went south for us. So we went through like 10 years of drought the first year, and it was when Jamie was born and I'd finished work. So it was very challenging and tough. And then of course, you know, we had Shanae, and by this time I'd been diagnosed, and that was a much different journey. So it made life good again. But then we went through 9 months and being pregnant and carrying Jack, and then all of a sudden, you know, I lose my third child and he's not alive, he's gone, he's dead. And that was really traumatic, even probably more so later, but still at that time, knowing that God was faithful, and I just had this peace. I had absolute grief, like I still remember how much my heart hurt and broke, but there was just this peace that sort of was unnatural, and nurses and doctors couldn't understand it. And that was just God. God is still faithful no matter what we go through. So it's like, you know, your world can crash and die, and I think probably only a mum will understand what it feels like. You can lose someone close to you, but when it's someone that you've carried and birthed and born and they die, that's just another whole level again. And God was still faithful. So I just know when anything happens, he's there. It's just, he's faithful. That's it. End of story.
If life has taught me one thing through the highs and lows, especially like if you're going to go with the lows, it's just to, you know, stick with the people you can trust, really. And if you need to talk about something or share something, like you got to have your friends or your family that you can trust with that, and you know, you can lean on them, and that you can depend on them to not share your things that you're going through or whatever you need, but they can also help you because they care about you as well.
Yeah, stay close to God, because sometimes life feels like a roller coaster. You sort of have patches where you're cruising along and enjoying the view and going, oh mate, life is so awesome, loving this, and then all of a sudden you hit the hill, and sometimes it feels really, really steep, and you're like, oh man, this is just tough going. I can't do this. How? I'm at the end of my tether. But you get to the top, and you can't get to the top without going through those hard times. And then the view from the top is incredible, and you feel so close to God. But then, like a roller coaster, sometimes then before you know it, you're zooming down and you feel like you're out of control. And so I guess remembering those good cruisy moments, so that when you go through hard times, then you look back on them and it gives you the strength and the courage to face what's coming, and yeah, how to get through it. Hang in there. In the words of a famous fish, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Because life will get better. The dark days don't last forever. Keep your eyes on Jesus, because everything else will fall into place if you keep focus on him. Yeah.
That's perfect.
I'd say two things. Like, the first thing is that, like, Jesus is closer than you know, and he really does care about where you're at, and he wants to meet you where you're at, no matter how the situation might look. And he really does want to help you, and he can help you. It might seem so like such a far away thing that, like, how could God ever help me? Why would God ever want to help me? But he is an up close and personal God, and he does want to meet you where you're at. And I would just say, like, talk to someone you trust. Come talk to a youth leader, talk to an older person in your life who you trust, because they've probably been through some similar things in their life, and they can help equip you with the tools that you need in this time that you might be struggling.
Yeah, if you're a teenager and you're struggling, maybe your friends are you're not sure who your friends are or anything like that. You can turn to your parents, because your parents do care about you. They always want the best for you, even if sometimes they don't show it or they don't let you know. Deep down, they do want the best for you. So if you can't turn to any friends for answers or questions or support like that, you can turn to your parents or your guardians, because they're the people that have spent that time, made that decision in themselves to be there for you. So
get somebody around you who can help you. I actually think sometimes it's really good to get someone that's about 10 to 15 years older than you. And it sort of comes back in circles. I remember I had an older, I'd never sung until I was 16, and it was an older, when I say older, she was probably only about 8 years older than me, but she was friends of my parents because she was a really young mum. And she actually was one that dragged me on things, said, come and sing a song with me. Never sung at all. So 16, it was the first time, but having someone in your life who can maybe see something in you or pull something out of you, or someone you can turn to or talk to that's not always a parent. If you can talk to your parents as well, that's really good, but not everyone has that. So if you don't have that, you need to have somebody else who's actually lived some life. Like, don't go and ask your 16-year-old girlfriend what she thinks about that situation, because she doesn't know either, and she's got her own issues she's dealing with. And she can then unintentionally maybe too foist some of her insecurities back onto you, and there's all of this projection and stuff coming from everywhere. Get with someone that's older that you can trust, someone that's lived a little bit. There are plenty of people even in our church, in our youth group. Like, get someone in, if you're a teenager, look for someone in their late 20s or their 30s, someone who's got kids, so they understand what it is a little bit more about, like, sacrifice.
If you could tell your younger self something, younger self not being that long ago, when you were like 12 or something like that, what would you say?
Golly.
Remain true to who you are. For me, God kind of called me to look out for the people on the fringes and to love on them, and to not worry so much about being in with the cool group and fitting in. And it's sort of something I've battled with my whole life. At different times, I think I've managed to do that, and that's where I find the greatest peace, is when I obey God. So just, get into know God, and then know what He wants for your life and follow after that. Don't try and conform to the world and do what they say you should do.
Oh, just to like continue to foster the passion that like God laid down in my heart. Like the very first time I encountered Him, and then like multiple times thereafter, to continue to foster that. And like I remember how amazing it was that I just felt like I could burst, like with that I needed to tell someone about God, like to allow that to continue in my life, because man, like that is something so powerful that God sets down within us. And you know, when you're young or at any age, like it's so easy to get fearful of what other people might think, or you know, keep it quiet and keep it to yourself. It's very easy to do that, but yeah, I guess God like set a passion down within me, and yeah, I think I just could have done better at like fostering that passion, or you know.
We probably, and it'd be the same thing that I would like to say to teens out there as well, and to myself, be content. When I look back now, so I look at the photos from back then, and I look at images and things, and like, for most, I think this would mostly be a female thing, we all, well, speak for me, body image, body conscious. What are people thinking? What are they going to say? What am I wearing? What am I looking like? I'm not thin enough. I don't look pretty enough. My hair's not right. My makeup's not right. I can't do this. I can't do that. All of that stuff. When I look back now, and I still think like, oh heck, how do I look? Oh, there you go, there's hairs. And like, yeah, before we got here, I'm like, oh no, I've got fluff all over me. My jumper left fluff, but whatever. That's sort of still in there, but trying not to let it be the all-consuming thought of like what it is. Because now that I look back, and at the time I remember thinking, oh, you know, I don't look right. I'm still not looking right. And I think I look back now and like I was a size 8, perfect size 8. Yeah, and children, la la. No, not really, eating the wrong things. But at the time, I remember being size 8, and you know, and other people like, oh yes, I know it, but I wasn't happy. So even though to other people I looked right, and you know, and dressed right, and all of that sort of stuff, I still wasn't happy or content with how I was myself. I still hadn't accepted that. So that's probably one of the hardest things you'll go through in that horrible, 13 to 20. And yeah, and even, you know, later on we do it all the time, but looking back I think, well gee, why wasn't I? Because look at that, you looked normal. Yeah, so try to find contentment with wherever you are, and find something that inspires you.
And look, I added this one. I didn't actually put this, but do you
Oh.
have any regrets?
Yeah, I think like some of my regrets would be like maybe some of the people who I hung around with and you know, like chose to let myself hang around. I did like absolutely in those situations was trying my best to guard my heart and let God guard my heart. But like that it's okay to remove like myself. I should have been more okay with like removing myself from situations, you know, when the others were like talking badly about someone else, or standing up and saying like, no, that's not okay. You know, and just being a bit more wise about who I place myself around.
Talking. And being really tough. And I was like, my parents were really great, but my dad was a taskmaster, and he knows that himself, and he'll say it, and he's softened so much when grandkids came along, interestingly. Not when we were older, but when grandkids came, he sort of changed and softened. And I was so much a task-orientated person sort of thing, which is why I do get so much done, because I'm not airy-fairy, fluffy, and that's just not me. I'm pretty much just like, boom, let's do this, don't waste my time, let's get into it, let's get it done. So yeah, probably when I was younger and still leading areas, like leading a youth team, because I was only in my 20s when I was doing all that as well. Probably too tough and not enough people person, but I didn't have that same level of empathy and understanding that came about probably until I had kids, and then even another level again once Jack had passed away. So that was and that was late 28, 29, 30 when that all happened. So that sort of softened me, and I think now probably that's the one thing that I regret, the way I would just be too task and focused on that and not enough of the balance of getting it both right sort of thing. Yeah, but regrets? How you speak to people is important. That's probably it.
That's awesome.
Yes. That I didn't put into my relationships more as a teenager. I got caught up and focused on one thing and one thing only, and a lot of my relationships fell away because of it, and it took me years to get it back, and it was a lonely journey. So yeah, just love on people. Let them know that you love them, that you care about them, that you're interested in what is going on in their lives. Because God didn't create us to be hermits. He wants us to be a community, a body of Christ. So just love on people.